Hello, everybody. I'm Jamie Wolf. I'm here at Pine Ridge Baptist, and I'm going to be reading out of the New Living Translation. I'm in chapter 16, and I hope this blessed at least one person who watches it. And let me just have a brief word amendment of prayer, and we'll get started. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for this day and this giving us the time to do this. And I'm going to thank you so much for Brother Jerry taking his time up recording these videos for me. And like I said, I hope it just reaches one person and encourages them to read and grow in their faith, Father, because there's nothing like learning and reading and learning about you, Father. And I just wanted to have a minute of prayer for whoever's on our prayer list. I know Miss Jane's having some problems, and I pray for her. And I know Pastor James is having some problems, and I know they're both in pain. And Father, I ask that you please just minister to them, Father, and meet them where they need you and lift them up and encourage them and know we love them. Church body loves them. And Father, we just wish for them to come back, Father. We miss them. And whoever else is on the prayer list, you know their needs and you know how they need to be ministered to, Father, and just love them and remind them you're in control and you're still on the throne, and you will make everything, you will fulfill your word as you say you will, Father. And we thank you for that. And just thank you again for we can sit here in our church without persecution, Father, and love you and praise you and worship you, and we can learn to be better servants and followers of you, Father, of your Son Jesus. And I just want to say thank you again, and I pray in your Son's precious and holy name, Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm in chapter 16, as I said. I'm starting out in leaders demand a miraculous sign. Excuse me. One day the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. He replied, "You know the saying, red sky at night means fair weather tomorrow. Red sky in the morning means foul weather all day. You know how to interpret the weather signs in the sky, but you don't know how to interpret the signs of the times. Only an evil, adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign, but the only sign I will give them is a sign of the prophet Jonah." And Jesus left them and went away. Later, after they crossed to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they had forgotten to bring any bread. "Watch out," Jesus warned them. "Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." At this time, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying. He said, "You have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with the 5,000 I fed with the 5 loaves and the baskets of leftovers you picked up, or the 4,000 I fed with the 7 loaves and the large basket of leftovers you picked up? Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? So again, I say, beware the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then at last they understood that he wasn't speaking about yeast and bread, but about the deception and teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Peter's declaration about Jesus. When Peter came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, "Who do you people say that the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are the blessed son of Simon. Because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you, you did not learn it from any human being. Now I say to you that you're Peter," which means rock. "And upon this I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forgiven in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." Then he sternly warned the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Jesus predicts his death. From then on, Jesus began his disciples plain that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the leaders, the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day he would be raised from the dead. Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. "Heaven forbid, Lord," he said, "this will never happen to you." Jesus returned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human's point of view, not from God's." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways. Take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is there anything more worth than your own soul? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in the glory of his Father and will judge all the people according to their deeds. And I tell you the truth, some standing here right now will not die before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Excuse me a second. Now, that was a short chapter, but there is some really powerful stuff in here. It gets to be controversial here in some places. And Jesus is in his close to being at the end of his ministry. The Pharisees are coming at him harder. They're being relentless to him to prove he is the Messiah. And he keeps opposing him until, "No, I've given you signs. I'm not going to give you any more signs." But he did tell them about the sign of Jonah. He told them that because Jonah sacrificed his life just as Jesus did, for others. He was hidden from the sight of men and provided for when he disappeared and was hidden from them. He came back after 3 days as back from the dead and preached repentance to the Ninevites. He rejected going to the Ninevites and preaching to them. He hated them. He wanted them destroyed. But the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they came together before all this, and they joined up together, not for a good way. They joined up to oppose Jesus. And that's when he told them about Jonah. And the Pharisees and Sadducees hated each other. They were bitter enemies. And the Pharisees actually were a little bit lax in their laws. They made up their own laws, and they didn't follow God's laws. They made their own and broke their own laws. The Sadducees strictly stuck to the law. They stuck to the Hebrew law. And they were a little more rich or aristocrats, and they might have been a little more meaner. They might have been like rich people are today, kind of stuck up, or may think they're above the Pharisees, even though they're not, and they weren't. I just mention one thing real quick. I think to this very day, the Pharisees still exist. Even people don't realize it. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I truly do. But he told him of the prophet Jonah. And Jonah is one who rejected what God wanted him to do. But he did it anyway because he didn't have a choice. It's like Moses. He rebelled. He didn't want to do it. He didn't think he was equipped to do it. He stuttered. He couldn't communicate well to people. And but God met Jonah or met Abraham or Moses halfway and sent Aaron to him. Jonah was on his own, but he still did what God required of him. He did what he asked him to. It also refers to Peter as being the rock. Jesus called Peter the rock, but because Peter knew Jesus was the Son of the living God without man telling him. God revealed this to Peter, and Jesus commended him for doing it. His other disciples called Jesus John the Baptist, called him Jeremiah, they called him Elijah, but Peter knew better. Peter knew he was the Son of the living God. He knew he was Messiah. He knew he was God in flesh on earth. And Jesus commended him for knowing this and not being bold enough to speak out and not hold it back in front of other people, because he was in front of crowds in a place in Caesarea Philippi, which was pagan. They had different gods and they worshiped whatever. They didn't worship the God we do. They worshiped, it was vile, to put it mainly, I'm sure. And him saying that might have caused some kind of rebellion, but he said it anyway because he's a very bold person. And and there's one thing we don't ever think about. There's people living this day and people who go on what people say or who Jesus is. And if it's not revealed to you by God, And if you don't experience him for yourself, you never will understand who he is. You may not ever be saved. You might not ever surrender to him. But people these days look at Jesus as being not real because you can't see him, you can't touch him, but we can definitely feel him in our hearts. We can feel his love. We feel his presence. We can feel his conviction when we're wrong, even just the wrong thoughts, even wrong, not to mention about wrong actions. I mean, there's plenty of days I could go take back what some things I've done or said, and I can't, and I have to suffer for them. I know many times Jerry's mentioned that we cause ourselves to lose blessings. And Jesus will, when we see him, he'll show them to us, and he'll burn them up. And those are the ones you missed out on. And that's just how it is. But I just think Peter was one who was singled out. He was not held above him, and I think Jesus had a little more compassion for him. He had a little more understanding for Peter. Peter did not see himself as a rock. He saw himself as let's see. Peter said, we are all part of living stones. He did not see him as a rock. It said we are all living stones. And he was the first living rock among many living rocks, and Jesus as the cornerstone. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because we base our faith on Jesus. We build our churches on Jesus. We put our love and faith of our heart into him, and being who he says he is. And if we truly believe, we'll watch how we live and watch what we say, and we have to live like we say we are. We have to, if we're going to walk the walk, or we're going to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk as well. I truly believe that, but we're all going to fail also. We're all going to fall short. It's a known fact. We're all going to sin. It doesn't matter. But also, I think Peter was set apart from the rest of the disciples. I've heard it said more than once, and by Ronnie Owens especially. Remember, some of y'all remember he had the tent revival, was here several times. He said he thinks Peter, John, and James were part of the circle of three. They were Jesus' more favored because he knew they were more stable and more reliable. He could go to them first before he went to the other disciples, because Peter especially had the faith. Peter knew exactly who he was, without a doubt, even though he rebelled against him. And we do the same thing. I mean, you can't say that we don't do the same thing, but sometimes we go too far, and we will pay for it. But just as long as we don't forget where faith is, that's the main important thing. Peter along the other disciples were given authority to establish boundaries in the first church. We didn't learn this during Wednesday night when Brother Jerry took us to the book of Acts. And one thing I was a little confused about, but I understand now that Peter and Paul together started the first church. And I truly believe that. And some people say Paul started it, some people say Peter started it, but I believe he started it together. This is, like I said, there's some controversy in this. And some people think Peter was the first pope, and it's still a debate to this day, and we don't think that. The Baptist Church doesn't think that. He was a prophet. He was a disciple of Jesus. And there's so much in this chapter as is overwhelming. Like I said, it's a short chapter, and there's some very powerful stuff. And he goes on to lay out his destiny to the disciples. He's telling them at his death. Peter rebuked him. Peter didn't want to hear that. He was looking at it from his own selfish personal ways. He told him there's no way this could happen to him, but Peter was not thinking himself. Satan knew this. Peter wasn't thinking right, and he used this to advantage. And that's why he rebuked Jesus. And that's why Jesus turned around and rebuked Peter. He told him, "Get behind me, Satan," because he knew his opposing him was directly from Satan. Even though Peter didn't realize it, Jesus did. And the thing from a man's point of view, and which is true, some people get saved, like I said before, and they're like, it's like the soils, the different kind of soils that Jesus explained to us before. And in the other part of Matthew, I think somebody that rejects Jesus is on stony soil because it'll sprout and look good, but it won't last long. They think there's something else to come along. But Peter wasn't like that. Peter knew he was who he was, and he never backed down from him. He never took a second breath. There's another point I wanted to make about this. There's a point that can't be left out, and that's denying self, not self-denial. There's two different things. Self-denial is giving up something we might love, maybe for exercise, maybe to diet, maybe for any reason. It's something giving up for our own self. But when we deny ourselves, we surrender ourselves to God, we surrender to Christ, and obey and take up a cross, and we walk like He was. We take up a cross daily and follow Him. And that's a statement in itself. We have made a cross a ritualistic item, and it's in traditions, and it's become ritualistic to a lot of religions and a lot of people, and it's not. The cross is not a place of beauty. The cross is a place of death. I don't want to hurt anybody or offend them, but that's just true. It was used in many executions. That's the way most executions were formed back during disciples' time. The Jews weren't allowed to do it. The Romans were charged to do it with. But the whole thing is, it's not what people think. It's just we have to follow Jesus in knowing that we're going to go to our death, knowing that we can't save ourselves. And as long as we put our faith and trust in Him, we know we'll have the power of resurrection. And the ones who don't, they have no hope. And we know that. And whether they understand it or not, we don't know. I have several people I know, one of my neighbors, I don't think they understand this. And the only thing I can do now is pray for them. That's my only choice I have to do. He went through a major heart attack, and he's blessed to be here. And I don't know if he understands it or not. But God knows who I'm talking about. And I pray for him just to use his one last chance God gave him. Do you know many people who wear crosses, and do they know what it means to wear the cross? Do they know that they will face death? Some people wear it for beauty. Some people wear it for jewelry. Some people make themselves stand out, wanting other people to think they're Christian when they don't have a clue what it means. So you got a lot of things in here people can go either way with, but somebody who wears a cross should know what it means and knows what it stands for. These days, we have false teachers not only on the news but in churches, saying that we can save ourselves and we don't need Jesus. We have people on TV, on political leaders. We have people in the news, on popular talk shows, anywhere you look, on sitcoms, anywhere. They'll mock Jesus and say, we don't need Jesus, we can do it ourselves. And those are the ones a lot of people put their trust in. They put their faith in people like that because they're popular, and some people love them, even though they're just humans. But we can't put our faith in people like that. The only place we can put our faith is in Jesus. And another thing about self-denial is it's not self-indulgence. And it means, and self-denial means it's not to be about ourselves. Because that's what the world's turned into. The world has turned into meism, me, I, why. People these days don't put themselves, they don't put other people in front of themselves like Jesus did. And that's a disappearing way of life, unfortunately. And like I said, there's one thing about wearing a cross. There's the last thing I have to say, and I'm going to be done. And like I said, helping people and putting them first has unfortunately become a way of the past. Nobody wants to help anybody anymore. Not as much as you would think, not like they used to. And the one thing we're all to face is to follow in Jesus' footsteps. And one thing for sure, we are going to face a certain death. And you cannot live until you walk your death with Jesus. That's how you're going to find resurrection. You have to die first to find your resurrection. Thank you. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope you watch this and you get some kind of encouragement from it. I love you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.